We are here because, as you can imagine, as the climate continues to change, our colleagues have more and more work. There's just no capacity within the humanitarian sector to deal with all the problems that are happening. Our colleagues from the Philippines Red Cross, who were supposed to be here, of course, need to be dealing with the consequences of an unprecedented typhoon. And this is consistent with what science tells us. We should expect more frequent, more intense, more bizarre extreme events, that if we don't do something before, it means that after the shock people will suffer if they are lucky to be alive.
It's a difficult thing for many people to understand that our actions might be ending up in humanitarian disasters. How do you explain that to people on the ground?
In the beginning, I would talk science and people would get very bored, so I started developing more interactive methods. So for example, if this represents the rain, we could say that, oh, maybe a 1 is a drought, a 6 is a flood, and other values are normal, and people can make decisions, winning or losing beans, and we throw the rain and we see, okay, no disaster. But if the science says that a typhoon is about to come, maybe it's no longer that object, it's a big flip of the coin that has 50% chance of causing trouble. And if the typhoon goes your way, it could hurt. We need to help people understand what's going their way at different timescales. It can be tomorrow's typhoon, it can be El Nino and droughts, it can be long-term climate change and sea level rise. What we find is that science is potentially useful, but it never gets used unless people understand what is being said. We at the Climate Center, in collaboration with the Red Cross, Red Crescent teams and partners, are trying to help bridge what we know with what we do. And of course, it's a lot of work. We need to do much, much more, but we're here to figure out how to work with others to do more.
That's an excellent explanation, and I'm sure it rings true with a lot of people watching what's happening in the Philippines. How can you take action at these talks to try and prevent the likelihood of extreme weather events increasing?
Well, as a humanitarian group, as the humanitarian sector, we care for people not suffering. We want mitigation to be successful so that the climate doesn't change too much, because otherwise people will suffer. Looks like we're not very good at that, so we want adaptation to succeed. So if the climate changes, we're prepared for it. Doesn't look like we're doing enough on that either. We want to see more happening. We wish all the negotiators a good agreement. Now, if not enough mitigation and not enough adaptation, then what's left is there will be loss, there will be damage. We are used to dealing with that. We are used to picking up the pieces when others don't do what could be done. We are experts in the humanitarian sector at dealing with loss and damage. Since loss and damage is one of the rich areas that are growing in the context of the UN Climate Convention, we wish to engage here in conversations with those who make decisions. First of all, to make our knowledge and our experience available. We think we can help figure out what to do. And one of the things that we want to put forward is that should there be any agreement, any financial mechanism to support actions to deal with loss and damage, instead of focusing on after the disaster, after the shock has already happened, how about creating financial mechanisms that allow us to work before the shock, after science tells us that the shock is coming? If we see a strong tropical cyclone, if we see a strong El Nino, if we see unusually bizarre heat waves or snowstorms or whatever may be happening, can we have mechanisms in place to anticipate the loss and damage and to do something in the context of this convention that helps people on the ground take measures to reduce the loss and to reduce the damage? We're happy to talk with anyone who may be interested in this idea.
Sounds like a convincing argument, and loss and damage is really progressing. Are you talking to developed countries who've been traditionally resistant to this? And do you think you might progress this stream at these talks?
Yes, we're having conversations, and it's not, of course, just one person, it's the entire team trying to engage. We understand that there are technical complications and, of course, country-based positions. We do not want to engage into the details of the mechanism, whether or not and how. What we know is that something has to be done. We cannot collectively agree to commit suicide, and a form of collective suicide that will be suffered most by those who are most vulnerable, who didn't cause most of the problem. We need to do something. I think all developed countries agree that something has to be done, and doing something means supporting institutional arrangements with money, with knowledge, with other things. What we are conveying to those people in charge of raising their hands for or against text in the negotiated agreements is that if we are going to take responsibility for our own actions, then we need to think innovatively on how to harness what already is known. And it's not only about science, it's not only about governance mechanisms, it is also about humanitarian work, and especially working not only with the most vulnerable countries, but also with the most vulnerable people, who in addition to being most vulnerable, are also most capable to find solutions if given the right kind of information and support.